Good evening, everyone. My name is Aryan Pandey, and today I'll be presenting on the contributions of John Dewey to the conceptualization of curriculum. Dewey's philosophy of experimental education has had a profound impact on how we understand and implement curriculums in schools. I have chosen to focus on John Dewey because of his pioneering work in experimental education. I have chosen to focus on John Dewey because of his pioneering work in experimental education, as John Dewey in 1859 to 1952 was an American philosopher, psychologist, and educational reformer whose ideas have been influential in education and social reform. Often considered the father of progressive education, Dewey's work emphasized the importance of democratic principles and experimental learning. His groundbreaking work of Democracy and Education in 1916, Hopkins 2018, and Experiments and Education in 1938, Quay 2019 laid the foundation for many modern educational practices. Dewey argued that the education should be an interactive and continuous process where learners engage with their environment and experiences to construct knowledge. His belief in learning by doing has significantly influenced the development of project based learning and other activity learning methodologies in today's educational landscape. Dewey emphasized the importance of learning through experience, which has shaped modern educational practices. His work continues to influence how educators design and implement curriculum. Dewey believed that the education should not just prepare students for life but be a part of life itself. His ideas challenges the traditional rote memorization methods and advocate for a more dynamic and engaging approaches to learning. Dewey emphasizes the importance of learning through experiments, which has shaped modern educational practices. His work continues to influence how educators design and implement curriculum. Dewey believed that education should not just prepare students for life but be a part of life itself. His ideas challenge the traditional rote memorization methods and advocate for a more dynamic and engaging approach to learning. Furthermore, Dewey emphasis on democracy in education aligns with contemporary views on inclusivity and equity in the classroom. He believed that education should cultivate not only intellectual skills but also moral and social values, preparing students to participate fully in democratic society. His holistic approach considers the development of whole child, including their emotional and social well-being. Detailing Dewey's keys, issues, and ideas. Learning by doing, Dewey asserted that education should involve active participation and practical experiences. This approach encourages students to engage directly with the material, fostering a deeper understanding and retention of knowledge. Reflective thinking. He emphasized the importance of reflective thinking in learning processes, advocating for students to think critically about their experiences. Reflective thinking allows students to analyze their actions and learn from their experiences, promoting continuous improvement. Continuity and interaction. Dewey's principle of continuity refers to as the ideas of each experiences influences future learning, while interactions emphasizes the relationship between the learner and the environment. This dynamic process ensures that learning is relevant and connected to the real world. Democratic education. Dewey believed education should promote democratic values, encouraging students to be active and engaged citizens. He advocated for a classroom environment where students' voices are heard, respected, fostering a sense of community and responsibility. Detailing Dewey's keys, issues, and ideas. Dewey's philosophy centers around the idea that education should be grounded in real life experiences. He believed that students learn best through doing and reflecting on the activity. Dewey argued for a curriculum that is flexible, self centered, and connected to the students' interests and experiences. This approach encourages students to engage deeply with material, fostering a more meaningful and lasting understanding of the content. Dewey's experimental education framework is often implemented through project based learning, problem based learning, and other hand to hand activities. These methods not only enhance academic knowledge but also develop critical life skills such as problem solving, collaboration, and self directed knowledge. By integrating these experiences into the curriculum, educators can create a more engaging and effective learning environment. So, critique of Dewey's philosophy. Some supporters say that educational reformers Paulo Freire advocates critical pedagogy and sees education as means of liberation, aligning with Dewey's emphasis on active learning and critical thinking through real-world experiences. And some other scientists has emphasized social interaction and scaffolding in learning, supporting Dewey's approaches by highlighting the importance of hands-on experiences in educational development. Some progressive educators have said that Dewey's experimental learning approaches and expands it with his own theories, emphasizing the critical nature of learning through concrete experiments. Reflective observation, abstract conceptualization, and active experimentation. Whereas some say critics say that Dewey for potentially lacking system, organization, and coherence in curriculum design, arguing for a more structured approach, while some say that his philosophy for potentially neglecting the eclipse transmission of knowledge and structured organization of educational content. While supportive of Dewey's experimental learning approaches, Kolb emphasize the need for active experimentation and reflection to maintain academic rigor. Michael Foucault, known for critiques of institutionalization education and its power dynamics, Foucault questions how Dewey's ideas may influence and potentially change existing educational hierarchies. Examples of some critiques. Joseph critiques Dewey's experimental education for potentially undermining the systematic structure of curriculum design. Swahab argues that while Dewey's emphasis on activity learning is valuable, it may neglect the necessary coherence and subsequent organization need to ensure comprehensive educational outcomes with structured learning environments. Implement the practices. Dewey philosophy requires balancing innovative teaching methods with adherence to educational standards and assertive assessment criteria. Educators adopting Dewey's approach may need to advocate for curriculum flexibility and innovative assessment methods to effectively integrate experimental learning into traditional schooling. On the left hand side, we can see some supporters as well as some critics of Dewey's philosophy. Here are what critics have to say about Dewey's philosophy. And here are some examples of critiques that have critiqued Dewey's philosophy. Dewey's approaches raises several questions and concerns for educators. How do we balance experimental learning with standardized testing requirements? Are all subjects equally suited to experimental learning? So, some educators worry about the feasibility of implementing Dewey's ideas in large, diverse classrooms. Furthermore, there is the challenge of ensuring that experimental learning aligns with curriculum standards and educational outcomes. While experimental learning promotes deeper understanding, it may require more time and resources than traditional methods, which can be a constraint in many educational settings. Interactive questions. What challenges do you see in applying Dewey's principle in today's classroom? How can we ensure that experimental learning meets academic standards? And what strategies have you found effective in integrating experimental learning into your teaching practices? Critical analysis, slide 10. As an experienced educator, I find Dewey's emphasis on student engagement and relevance to be crucial. However, implementing his ideas requires careful planning and resources. The challenges lies in balancing experimental activities with curriculum standards and assessments. Strengths: promotes deep understanding. Experimental learning helps students internalize knowledge by connecting it to the real world context. Foster critical thinking and collaboration. Engage in hands on projects encourages students to think critically and work effectively with others. And what are the weaknesses, you say? Resources intensive. Implementing experimental learning can require significant resources, including time, materials, and teacher training. May not align with standardized testing, too. Standardized tests often focus on rote memorization and may not fully capture the benefits of experimental learning. Can anyone share an experience where they used experimental learning in their classroom? What were the outcomes? What strategies can we use to integrate Dewey's principle within the constraint of our current education system? How do we address the challenges of implementing experimental learning in our teaching practices? To round up, John Dewey's contribution to conceptualization of curriculum through experimental education remain highly relevant. His ideas challenge us to create engaging and meaningful experiences for our students. By focusing on active participation, reflective thinking, and democratic principle, Dewey's approach helps develop all-rounded individuals who are prepared to contribute positively to society. At last, I want to thank you all for attention and participation. So, I'll be taking questions and comments after this. Thank you.